Well, hello and welcome to a conversation with author Bonnie Jo Campbell, author of 5 books, National Book Award finalist, and a Guggenheim Fellow. So it is a pleasure to sit down with you today and talk about your latest collection, Mothers Tell Your Daughters, with its awesome cover. Is that you?
I know, it could be me. It's a little freckly for me, but it definitely looks like a girl from the neighborhood.
A girl from the neighborhood. Which
it is not, but it
not
looks
a girl from
like.
the neighborhood, but
we don't know where somebody in New York found that photo. And so we like it. So the girl in the truck. And in fact, we did, when I was growing up, have a truck just like that, only it was the aqua blue color instead of the green color.
You tend to write about working class lives. And American Salvage, as well as some of your other works. Tell me a little bit about what you're going to explore in this new collection here.
Yeah, well, this is a collection of 16 stories, and I do tend to write about working class people or even poor people, and those are the lives that really interest me, people who still have some struggle for survival. Mm-hmm. And in this collection, it's a little bit different from American Salvage. American Salvage was really interested in men's lives, and I was interested in exploring how they make the transition. They're making the transition from the old ways to the new. And in these stories, I focused more on the women, and what I found is they actually transition much more easily in that economic sense. But the troubles that these gals are having have to do with family relationships and other relationships. There's sexual relationships in here that are problematical, and I guess I wanted to explore what was going on with women in matters of family and sexuality, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I am really interested in the compelling and strong and varied voices of the women who occupy this collection. Can you tell me what you were trying to capture? And it's such a varied women who come from different generations, young women. You do first-person point of view, but then you switch it up a little bit as well. Tell me a little bit about the voices.
Yeah, it's really, that's the wonderful thing about a book of short stories, is that it allows you to explore worlds, plural worlds, and I was really interested in hearing from women that we hadn't heard from lately, women whose voices don't show up in the media, shall we say, very often, and I have a special interest in this book and everywhere of investigating the lives of farm women, rural women. And I think I'm especially interested in a kind of woman who's disappearing, kind of woman we don't see much anymore, and that's the kind of farm mother type, where, life on the farm really was a struggle, and not just an economic struggle, but a struggle against the elements, and maybe even a struggle against the men also who were on the farm. And I'm interested in those women who didn't have the luxury of being gentle or sentimental. These were women who were going to have to raise a whole bunch of kids and cook a lot of food for people, and they were going to have to find a way to make the world accommodate everybody else as well as themselves. So I'm really interested in those women, and now it's hard to see those women sometimes. A woman who will yell at her children and then go out and wring a chicken's neck and pluck it and feed it to them.
Yeah, we don't see that gal very often.
No,
in
we really don't anymore.
Right.
And I think when we see it, we sentimentalize what life was like for farm women. But it was kind of a tough business. And I guess I'm interested in the ways in which maybe those women's lives serve as a metaphor for the ways in which we still have to be really tough and unsentimental in aspects of our lives. And so maybe looking at them can give us insight into the ways in which we have to be careful about being too gentle or too soft.
Right, because one of the things that seems to sort of come up with the women and their mothering in particular and parenting seems to be a problematic adventure for these women. It's a real challenge. And you present, various stages of parenting from even the beginning of pregnancy. There's trouble, and for many of the women, you just at the very beginning, and then we have works that explore even further along. Why is parenting so problematic?
Yeah, I did. It's funny when you have a collection of stories because you don't necessarily sit down and say, I'm going to write about parenting. But what happens is, what happened for me is that I wrote a lot of stories, and I found that I was investigating these themes in the story. These themes kept coming up in stories that I was exploring, that the issues that mothers and daughters have don't disappear suddenly at age 18 or 22 when the butterfly flies from the nest and makes it on her own. These problems really keep working, and I shouldn't say problems, but I should say these relationships keep growing and developing and keep maybe looping around, that we fall on old habits of our youth sometimes, even though we're adults and dealing with middle-aged mothers. But I was very interested in, there's a number of stories in this book that deal with pregnancy. And never does the pregnancy go really smoothly. And there are a couple of stories of unwanted pregnancy where the end may be a little different than people expected. And so pregnancy, and also some people have remarked that in some of the stories, being pregnant is not so different from being inhabited by an alien creature.
Right. In fact, in your novel, Once Upon a River, your main character, Margot Crane, when she's pregnant, talks a little bit about that baby, that fetus is sort of being an invader, an invasive species.
And it's stealing her energy and stealing her even her balance. And I was very interested in that in these stories. That there's one story called Natural Disasters, where a pregnant woman keeps being afraid of tornadoes and thunderstorms and floods and everything that could cause her trouble, when really what she's afraid of is what she's carrying around inside her. That's the natural disaster from pregnancy and then all the way through. I guess I really love doing the stories with the middle-aged mothers because, mothers who are maybe dealing with daughters who are middle-aged, because I feel like that's something we haven't heard from. These kind of tough survivor mothers who are still tough survivors even when they don't need to be anymore, and maybe they are a little hard on their daughters.
You're such a cheerful person.
Well,
and one of the things that sometimes when we put stories in front of readers who are perhaps college students, that oftentimes stories assigned in college literature classes seem rather harsh. The endings are not all nicely tied up and happy. And you give us these really strong, harsh circumstances. Your characters are often put in very vulnerable positions. Why do you think good literature seems to have that ingredient of harshness, of trouble?
I know. I feel so many of my college students, ask that. Why can't we read some happy stories? And I wonder, maybe it's like, didn't there used to be a trend toward trying to have a newspaper that had happy stories in it? And I think it folded.
Yeah, in fact, I hardly even have heard about it.
Yeah, the good news newspaper is not a big hit. I think it's the work of literature to explore difficulty. And there are other kinds of writing that are more, say, escapist. Mystery stories and romances. They're very escapist in the sense that in some way they encourage the reader to turn off her brain and just go for the ride, and just in a romance what's going to happen at the end, and in a mystery they're going to catch that bad character and they're going to put that bad character away. And in literature, in literary works, like in real life, we don't know what's going to happen, and it makes it a little scarier. And it makes it more mysterious, certainly. And I think those of us who have come to love literary fiction, we are looking for ways to explore the very same problems that we will encounter, the very difficulties, or problems that are similar and that we can see as metaphors for problems that we've seen in fiction, or maybe
or even
vice
deep
versa.
fears that we might have that haven't happened to us yet.
Yeah, that is
know.
true. That is true. And this book, I think, for some people will be a little bit difficult because it explores some scary stuff. It explores rape. It explores, again, unwanted pregnancy. It explores the dark place that families sometimes go. The places where families, things in families are not like the pictures we see in Norman Rockwell. They're not like sitcom families, but they're families that have to work through difficult problems, and maybe economic problems, and maybe other kinds of problems. But I think there's a reason that the stories that have really lasted, the stories that we continue to read for hundreds of years, we're still reading Chekhov, we're still reading, Moby Dick, we're still reading Charles Dickens, because they were dealing with the tough problems.
Right.
Here's the thing. If you've got a really simple problem to solve, don't write a story. Just solve the darn problem, But if you've got a really difficult situation, that's something worth writing about.
Mm-hmm. So it's just a natural fit that good literature deals with that, right?
Yeah, it gives you something worth filling up those pages over.
Right. Yeah, and a good exploration. Despite, though, we don't want to just sort of corner you into the harshness. There's a lot of humor in this book as well.
Good. I'm glad that you see it that way. That's good.
And in fact, in your short story, My Dog Roscoe, our first-person narrator, envisions or imagines that her dog is the reincarnation of her dead boyfriend. And that sort of takes, there's a life of its own that's created from that. What were you interested in when you included that in here?
Yeah, well, I think at that time, I had a cat who just kept looking at me so knowingly all the time. And that cat seemed to know things about me that I thought the cat shouldn't know. And so I started wondering if maybe there were, these animals that were coming back to us to join us in the new life from the old. And I guess I enjoyed the story is about a woman who did have a very difficult boyfriend who caused lots of trouble, and now she's happily married to a very nice man, only she's finding herself, and she's pregnant, and she's finding herself strangely restless, and she doesn't know why, and so she fixates on a stray dog and starts, I guess, revisiting this old love of hers through the stray dog. And so, it's always fun to have a dog in a story, and so the dog serves as a good place to have a lot of fun goings on. And so she really does carry it to the extreme and really believes it at that time. And then she has to make a choice between the dog and her husband. So
am I making a choice too? Is this Jack? Or is
that's
this
Jack. Yes,
oh,
that's
Jack.
That's Don
Jack.
Quixote back there.
Okay.
So.
All right. Jack seems to be taken with me.
Yeah.
You have a story entitled Daughters of the Animal Kingdom.
Yeah,
right?
that was a fun story to write, where there's a woman who's older who thought she couldn't get pregnant, finds herself in that way, and she's a biologist, and so she keeps looking to the animal kingdom to find meaning about her predicament. And the great thing about nature, it's just chock full of meaning. Nature, like the landscape, is just chock full of metaphor, and so that was a really fun story. I hope people like that story, because it was really fun to write.
Right. There are 16 stories in this collection. Some of them are very short, maybe a page and a half long. Do you consider that flash fiction?
Yeah, some people call it flash fiction. Some people call them shorts, which you could wear. I always thought I should wear shorts while I'm writing shorts.
Well, that would be compelling.
Yeah, and but also I think there's one microfiction. Those stories are about 300 words, and I really I enjoy the challenge of trying to write those because they're just the challenge of putting a whole world, because a short story has to contain the whole world. That's how they work.
Yeah.
into one page is a really fun challenge. And I thought the thought about including them in this collection is that they sort of serve as palate cleansers. You know, they serve as, after maybe some of the stories do deal with difficult material, and then these very short stories are a little lighter, maybe, or maybe not even lighter material, but maybe the language is more lyrical.
We were talking a little bit about how some of the stories in here are considered microfiction. You've done both novels and short stories. Can you tell us a little bit about the differences in that process or your goals?
Yeah, well, I would say that I always set out to write a short story, and then sometimes it won't wrap up. And so I fail to write a short story, and that's how I write a novel.
That's how it becomes.
Yeah, so my novels are my failed short stories. And there do turn out to be differences in, as a writer, I have to know what my reader expects. In a novel, the reader wants to be brought into a whole world. And so I find that I have to answer a lot more questions and be a lot more attentive to maybe how what I'm writing relates to the real world. I have to be more attentive to that in a novel. I think in a short story, readers are willing to just suspend the world for a little while to read a short story. And so I think in short stories we can be a little more outrageous, and that's part of the fun of short stories. And once we get into a novel, though, I think we owe a lot more because the reader is giving us maybe 20 or 30 hours of their time in a novel. And so I think we end up having to give that reader a lot more context, I guess.
Well,
Lisa?
thank you, Bonnie, for giving us your time, and I look forward to seeing this book out in the world.
That's great.
Oh, he just ate 2 pieces of paper behind you.
Oh my gosh.